Question now is, can the rest of the matric exams be safeguarded? And why did measures put in place after the first leak not stop the second? Let's discuss this now with a senior lecturer at the University of Johannesburg's Education Studies Department, Nasreen Dasoo. Good evening, Nasreen. Thank you very much for your time. Apart from the very real criminal consequences, this is also extremely disheartening for learners who are putting their all into this, to know that others are getting the paper on WhatsApp hours before they sit down to write.
Good evening, Sandy. Of course, it's so frustrating, especially for an honest learner, somebody who didn't have access to that leaked paper. It must be devastating to have, with the prospect of being perhaps writing a new exam, and of course, the fact that the results are, the integrity of the exam is at stake, and so too the results of this leaked exam.
Absolutely, and we've seen that they've put measures in place. The Council of Education is the minister stepping up to tighten their systems. But the reality is we've had one leak and now we've had a second just over a week later. So there's clearly something problematic. Equally, we've had leaks so many years in a row. What do you think is wrong with the system?
All right, so in my comment to News 24 last week was that I think we need to find innovative ways of proctoring these exams and making sure that these exams are safeguarded. And of course to bring the real culprits to book, not to just leave it where it is. Because as I said before, exams have leaked in this country time immemorial. All of us have had experiences when we wrote matric exams to have a leak. So it tests the moral fiber of our society also. We cannot lay blame to an innocent 17-year-old to not, lay blame to a 17-year-old for sharing an exam paper that was leaked by an adult. So I think I would suggest that the department looks...
I would say, my mother would always say, 2 wrongs don't make a right. And at the age of 17, hopefully you know better. But certainly in an environment where corruption is rampant, and it seems there are no consequences for those who break the rules, it's perhaps understandable that a learner thinks maybe it's okay to cheat this test.
Yes, but my argument is that we are sitting with an education system that's not inskilling our learners for the future. So what sort of knowledge are we testing to start off with? Secondly, we're sitting with an exam that's a traditional form of assessment. For a future where we have a Generation Z that's so advanced in terms of social media, so the two are not gelling. Firstly, we have a 30-year-old discrepancy between a Generation Z learner and the kind of exams that we set. So we have to first look at our curriculum, and is our curriculum teaching the future learner or inskilling the learner for what the 4IR will present this learner with eventually, and are we using the proper type of assessment? So under these circumstances, perhaps we could have re-looked the way we assess these matric learners this year, given the extraordinary circumstances we find ourselves with the global pandemic. That's one issue. The second issue is, do we have enough checks and balances in place when these exams are set? Are we vetting our examiners correctly? Are we vetting the whole system of which exams reach the exam center correctly? So there are lots of issues here, and I don't think we've found the right solution still. So we need to look at how are we going to be testing learners for the future, given the fact that our curriculum presently is not as advanced as the generation that we are training, given the fact that our learners are so advanced with social media. Are we using social media to our advantage or to the disadvantage of the learner?
And it's interesting that you mention social media, because as you say, we've had exam leaks since exams were first set, I would imagine. But what's happening nowadays is that these papers move very quickly via social media because it's so easy to WhatsApp it. So does that make it actually more serious? Because, you know, we still have to test people in some way. You say that maybe the exams are not quite setting our children up for the future. I think you're probably right, but that's discussion certainly on a more broader level. But equally, they still have to pass what they're set, and they still have to not cheat. But does cheating in 2020, is it a lot more serious because of how quickly it can spread via social media?
I think I agree with you, yes. Social media is being used in a way that we're not familiar with anymore as older people, but younger people use it to their advantage to do deceitful things, regrettably. So I think also that we have to look at what kind of testing mechanisms we're putting in place. That this exam, a standardized exam, should not determine your entire future. That we should be looking at performance-based assessment. We should be looking at continuous assessment. Given the circumstances of the pandemic and what it's done to our education system this year, we should have thought more clearly about how we were going to assess our matriculants.
Yes, and it's perhaps something to give a lot of thought for in the future, because
so
that is
too.
one way to
Yes.
avoid the cheating if you have continuous assessment. Thank you so much for your views. A very thought-provoking topic indeed. Senior lecturer in the UJ Education Department, Nasreen Dasoo.